My wife confessed. She had feelings for a high school soccer player she coached, then called me a paranoid hole for confronting her. When I asked her to explain, she scoffed and said, "You've always been super close to your younger brother, and I've never called you out for being weird." I just stared at her. Last night, she handed me a letter from him and broke down sobbing. My wife, 33, has been acting really strange lately, and I'm starting to think she might be cheating on me with one of the kids she coaches. I feel sick even typing that. Some background. My wife is an accountant by day, and in the evenings, she volunteers as a soccer coach for a local youth team. She's always loved soccer, and I thought it was great that she was so involved with the kids and the community. But recently, she's been dropping weird comments that are starting to really concern me. It all started about 2 months ago. She casually mentioned one of the boys on her team. He's 17, and I won't say his name for obvious reasons. At first, it was harmless stuff, like he's really talented for his age, or he's a natural leader on the field. I didn't think much of it because, well, she's a coach, and it's her job to encourage the kids, right? But then the comments started to get weird. Like one night, out of nowhere, she said, "You know, kid's name has really pretty eyes. They're so striking." I remember thinking, that's an odd thing to say about a kid you're coaching. I kind of brushed it off at first, but then more things followed. Another time, she came home after practice and said, "He's so much more athletic than anyone else on the team." I tried to brush it off, but something felt different. Then one evening, she added she'd also become secretive, turning her screen away when texting and staying later after practices. She'd give vague excuses like the team needed extra help or paperwork to catch up on. Last week, I came home early to find her on the couch texting with a huge smile. When she saw me, she quickly locked her phone and got flustered, claiming it was just a parent asking about game schedules. Something felt off. After talking to my lawyer friend, we agreed I should confront her about my concerns. He suggested meeting somewhere quiet but public in case she reacted irrationally. I took her to our local park and sat her on a bench away from crowds. I told her how serious the situation could be and that she must be completely honest with me, that I wanted to be on her side, but her behavior had led to serious suspicions. I explained I decided against looking through her phone despite being tempted, wanting to preserve trust between us. She immediately got defensive, calling me a paranoid a-hole for suggesting she'd be in a relationship with a minor. She said my questioning meant something was probably wrong with me and I must be hiding something. Her reaction confirmed something was being hidden. I suggested we look through her phone together for closure, saying even if there was nothing to hide, it would mean a lot if she'd humor me. We could laugh at how ridiculous I was being. She screamed about me invading her privacy and overstepping before storming to the car and driving to her friend's house. At 3 a.m., I got a long text. "I really don't think what I have been doing is wrong. It started with me just helping this kid with extra practice because he was struggling with drills. These private sessions became regular, and after 3 weeks, he sent me a friend request on Instagram. He wasn't the first on the team to send one, and I wouldn't usually accept, but since I was giving private coaching, I thought it made sense. He started sending DMS, so I responded because I'm not a total a-hole. Okay, maybe the texts aren't just about soccer anymore. There's nothing wrong with being friends with a kid. You've always been super close to your younger brother, and I've never called you out for being weird." The message proceeded to call me an a-hole for trapping her in a situation that would always leave her looking bad. She ended by saying she'd forgive me for being an insecure dickhead, but if I ever questioned her like this again, she'd file for divorce. I was in complete shock. This wasn't the kind, loving, respectful person I'd married. I understand what she was telling me isn't normal, and I can't believe how naive I've been, but I still feel there's even more she's not telling me. I read through everything she'd written again, searching for answers that weren't there. The vague explanations only deepened my confusion. On her phone, I don't know, maybe I am just being paranoid. Maybe this is more normal than I'm making it out to be, although this seems unlikely. Should I still try to look through her phone anyway, despite what she's told me? When we had met the previous day, my friend mentioned that this was out of his field, but that I shouldn't contact the police until I was more sure of anything, because if we did end up getting a divorce and she is technically innocent, calling the police on your wife for providing extra help to a kid she coaches wouldn't look very good for me in a courtroom. I sat there staring at my phone screen until my eyes burned. The clock on the wall ticked past 4 a.m. My hands shook as I set the phone down on the coffee table. I got up and paced around the living room, then went to the kitchen and made coffee even though I knew I wouldn't sleep anyway. The coffee maker gurgled and hissed. I opened the cabinet and grabbed a mug, then put it back and grabbed a different one. My mind kept racing through everything. The private coaching sessions, the Instagram messages, the way she'd smiled at her phone that day on the couch. I poured the coffee and burned my tongue on the first sip. The pain helped me focus. I needed to think clearly about what to do next. My lawyer friend had warned me about contacting the police without proof. But what if something was happening to that kid? What if I waited too long? I grabbed my laptop from the bedroom, trying not to look at our wedding photo on the dresser. Back in the kitchen, I opened a new document and started typing everything I could remember. Every strange comment, every late practice, every time she turned her phone away. The timeline started to take shape on the screen. 2 months ago, first mentions of the boy. 6 weeks ago, comments about his appearance. 3 weeks ago, the private coaching started. Then the Instagram connection. Now this confession that they were texting about more than soccer. I saved the document and password protected it. Then I opened another tab and searched for information about coach-student relationships. The results made my stomach turn. Article after article about inappropriate relationships, warning signs, legal consequences. I read until my eyes hurt. The sun started coming up. I heard birds chirping outside. Normal sounds for a normal morning, except nothing about this was normal. I made more coffee and kept reading. State laws, mandatory reporting, position of authority. The words blurred together. My phone buzzed. A text from my brother asking if I wanted to grab breakfast. I stared at it for a full minute before typing back that I couldn't today. He sent a thumbs up emoji. Simple, normal, everything I didn't have anymore. I closed the laptop and went to shower. The hot water helped clear my head. I needed to be smart about this. Emotional reactions wouldn't help anyone. I got dressed in jeans and a t-shirt, then sat back down at the kitchen table. The house felt too quiet. Usually by now my wife would be up, making her protein shake before her morning run. We'd chat about our plans for the day. She'd kiss me goodbye before heading to work. Instead, I was alone with a cold cup of coffee and a marriage that might be over. I picked up my phone and scrolled through our text history. Hundreds of messages, dinner plans, grocery lists, inside jokes, love notes. When had it changed? When had she started deleting messages and turning her screen away? A car door slammed outside. I jumped up and looked through the window, but it was just the neighbor leaving for work. I sat back down and tried to steady my breathing. This paranoia wasn't helping. I needed facts, not speculation. I opened my laptop again and logged into our shared calendar. Soccer practice was scheduled for Tuesday and Thursday evenings, games on Saturdays. I scrolled back through the past 2 months. There were extra entries, team meeting on a Monday, equipment check on a Wednesday, field prep on a Friday. Were these real or excuses for something else? My phone rang. My wife's ringtone. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, the notification popped up. I played the message on speaker. Her voice sounded tired and angry. She said she'd stayed up all night thinking and couldn't believe I'd ambushed her like that. She said she'd come by later to get some clothes and we could talk then if I could manage to be rational. The message ended with a sharp beep. I played it again, then again, listening for something in her tone. Guilt, defiance, fear, but all I heard was anger, like I was the one who'd done something wrong. I made a decision. I called my brother and asked if I could crash at his place for a few days. He didn't ask questions, just said yes. That's what I loved about him. He knew when to just be there without needing explanations. I packed a bag with enough clothes for a week, grabbed my laptop and charger, found myself standing in our bedroom, looking around at our life together. The mismatched nightstands we'd bought at different garage sales, the quilt her grandmother made us for our wedding, the pile of her books on the floor because she always read 3 at once. Back in the kitchen, I wrote a note, simple and clear. I'd be staying with my brother. She could have the house for now. We needed to talk, but not until we both had time to think. I left my brother's number in case of emergency. I signed it with just my initial. The drive to my brother's apartment took 20 minutes. I gripped the steering wheel and focused on the road. Red light, turn signal, merge merge left. Simple actions that kept me grounded. His building came into view, and I parked in visitor parking. He opened the door before I could knock. One look at my face, and he pulled me into a hug. I almost lost it right there in his doorway. He grabbed my bag and led me inside. His place was small but comfortable. He'd already made up a couch with sheets and a pillow. We sat at his kitchen table, and he poured me a beer even though it was barely noon. I told him everything. The comments, the secretive behavior, the confrontation at the park, the 3 a.m. text. He listened without interrupting, his face growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and ran his hands through his hair. He said this was heavy stuff, and he was glad I'd come to him. He asked what I planned to do next. I told him I didn't know. He suggested I document everything, keep a journal of dates and incidents, save any texts or emails. He said even if nothing illegal was happening, I'd need records if things went south with the marriage. It was practical advice, the kind of thinking I couldn't manage on my own right now. I spent the afternoon on his couch with my laptop, adding more details to my timeline. I remembered other things, how she'd started dressing differently for practice, how she'd bought new workout clothes that seemed more fashionable than functional, how she'd started wearing makeup to evening practices. My phone buzzed with texts from mutual friends. Word was getting around that something was wrong. I didn't respond to any of them. What would I even say? I suspected my wife might be having an inappropriate relationship with a teenager. The words sounded insane even in my head. Around 5 p.m. my brother ordered pizza. We ate in front of the TV, watching some mindless action movie. It helped to focus on something else for a while. Car chases and explosions instead of my imploding marriage. My wife texted again around 7. She'd been to the house and seen my note. She said we needed to talk in person. She said this was all a huge misunderstanding and I was blowing things out of proportion. She said she loved me and couldn't believe I was throwing our marriage away over nothing. I showed the texts to my brother. He read them carefully, then handed my phone back. He pointed out how she kept minimizing my concerns and making me the bad guy. He said that seemed like deflection. I hadn't thought of it that way, but he was right. I texted back that I'd meet her tomorrow afternoon at a coffee shop near our house. Public but quiet. She agreed immediately. Too quickly maybe, like she'd been waiting by her phone. That night I barely slept. The couch was comfortable enough, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. I kept thinking about that kid. Was he okay? Did he know this was wrong? Or did he think he was special? That this attention from an adult meant something? I must have dozed off eventually because I woke up to sunlight streaming through the window. My brother had already left for work, but he'd made coffee and left a note saying to make myself at home. I showered and tried to eat some cereal, but my stomach was in knots. I spent the morning researching more about grooming behaviors and inappropriate coach relationships. The patterns were disturbingly similar to what I'd observed. Special attention, private sessions, social media contact, gradual boundary crossing. My hands shook as I read. At 1 p.m. I drove to the coffee shop. I arrived early and got a table in the back corner. Ordered a black coffee I didn't want. Watched the door. She walked in right on time, scanning the room until she spotted me. She looked tired. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup. She got a latte and sat across from me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. 8 years of marriage reduced to awkward silence in a coffee shop. She started talking first, said she'd been thinking about everything and realized how it must look from my perspective. But she insisted nothing inappropriate was happening. The kid was just going through a tough time at home, and she'd been trying to be supportive. The texts were friendly, but nothing more. I asked to see the messages. Her face flushed, and she said she'd deleted them after our fight. Said she was angry and wasn't thinking clearly. I asked why she'd delete innocent messages. She said I was twisting everything to fit my paranoid narrative. We went in circles for an hour. Every question I asked, she had an explanation. Every concern I raised, she dismissed. She kept saying I was the one with a problem, that maybe I was projecting, that maybe I was the one hiding something. I finally asked her point blank if she had feelings for this kid. She hesitated just a second too long before saying no. That hesitation told me everything. I stood up to leave. She grabbed my wrist and begged me to sit back down. People were starting to stare. I sat. She leaned forward and whispered that yes, maybe she'd developed some feelings, but she hadn't acted on them. She said it was just a crush, like a celebrity crush, meaningless. She said she knew it was inappropriate, and she'd already decided to step back from coaching. I asked when she decided that. She said just now, in this moment, realizing how it was affecting our marriage. I didn't believe her. I asked if she'd told him about these feelings. She said no, absolutely not. She would never burden a child with that. But the way she said child sounded forced, like she was reminding herself what he was. I felt sick. I told her she needed to resign from coaching immediately, not step back, resign, cut all contact with the team, and especially with him. She said I was overreacting, that resigning would raise questions. People would wonder why. I said that wasn't my problem. She'd created this situation and she needed to fix it. She said I was being controlling and unreasonable. I pulled out my phone and showed her one of the articles I'd found. A coach in another state who'd started exactly like this. Private sessions, friendly texts. It had escalated over months until they were caught in a physical relationship. The coach went to prison. The kid needed years of therapy. She pushed my phone away and said that wasn't her. She wasn't some predator. She was just trying to help a struggling kid, and maybe she'd gotten too emotionally invested, but she hadn't crossed any real lines. I asked her to define real lines. She couldn't. I gave her an ultimatum. Resign from coaching within 24 hours or I'd report the situation myself. Her face went white. She asked if I was threatening her. I said I was trying to protect everyone involved. Her, me, and especially that kid. She started crying. Real tears, not the manipulative kind. She said she didn't know how things had gotten so complicated. She loved coaching. It made her feel important and valued in a way her accounting job didn't. And this kid, he was special, talented. He listened to her like she mattered. I softened a little. I reached across the table and took her hand. I said I understood feeling unfulfilled, but this wasn't the answer. She was the adult, the authority figure. She had to be the responsible one. She nodded, still crying. We sat there for another hour, talking more calmly. She admitted she'd been unhappy for a while. Not with me specifically, just with life. Turning 33 had hit her hard. She felt like she'd checked all the boxes. Career, marriage, house, but something was missing. Coaching had filled that void until it became something else. I suggested counseling. Individual for her, couples for us, if she wanted to try saving our marriage. She agreed to both. I said she still had to resign from coaching first. No negotiation on that point. She nodded again. We left the coffee shop together but drove separate cars. She went home. I went back to my brother's place. I felt drained but also relieved. We'd taken a first step, maybe not toward reconciliation, but at least toward resolution. That evening, she texted me a photo of her resignation letter, brief and professional, citing personal reasons for stepping down effective immediately. She said she'd email it to the league director in the morning. I thanked her for following through. My brother came home with Chinese takeout. I updated him on everything. He said I'd handled it well, better than he would have. He asked what my next steps were. I said counseling for sure, then see where things went. He supported whatever I decided. I slept better that night. Not great, but better. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my wife. She'd sent the resignation and already gotten a response. The director was disappointed but understood. Practice would be covered by the assistant coach until they found a replacement. I asked if she'd had any contact with the kid. She said no, and she'd blocked him on Instagram to remove temptation. I wanted to believe her. Trust but verify, my brother had said. Good advice for now. I went back to our house that afternoon to get more clothes and check the mail. Everything looked normal from the outside. The lawn needed mowing. The flower beds needed weeding. Regular homeowner stuff that felt surreal given everything happening. Inside, I found she'd cleaned obsessively. Every surface spotless. The dishwasher running. Laundry folded and put away. It was her stress response. When life felt out of control, she controlled what she could. I'd seen it before during tough times at work or family drama. I packed more clothes and grabbed a few books. Found our wedding album on the coffee table. Opened to a photo of us laughing at something off camera. I remembered that moment. Her cousin had tripped while giving a toast. We tried not to laugh and failed. Happier times. I left the album where it was and headed back to my brother's. Over the next few days, we texted regularly. She'd found a therapist who specialized in boundary issues and had her first appointment scheduled. She sent me links to marriage counselors for when we were ready. Part of me wanted to rush back home and pretend this never happened. But the wiser part knew we needed this space. She needed to work through whatever had led her to this point. I needed to figure out if I could trust her again. My brother let me stay as long as I needed. We fell into a routine. I worked from his kitchen table during the day. We grabbed dinner together most nights. Sometimes we talked about my situation. Sometimes we just watched TV and drank beer. Both helped. A week passed. My wife texted that therapy was hard but good. She was learning about herself, about why she'd been drawn to the attention from someone so young. She said she felt ashamed but also hopeful. She missed me. She loved me. She wanted to fix this. I missed her too, but I wasn't ready to go back yet. I told her to keep working on herself. I'd started seeing my own therapist to process everything. He helped me understand my own patterns, how I'd missed or dismissed red flags, how I'd prioritized keeping the peace over addressing problems. 2 weeks in, she asked if we could have dinner, somewhere public, but where we could really talk. I agreed. We met at the Italian place where we'd had our first date. Maybe that was manipulative, but it felt right somehow. Full circle. She looked better, more like herself. She'd had her hair done and wore the dress I'd bought her last Christmas. She smiled when she saw me, then caught herself like she wasn't sure she was allowed to. I smiled back. Small steps. Over pasta and wine, we talked about everything except our situation. Work, family, the news, movies we wanted to see. It felt almost normal until the check came and we both reached for it at the same time. Awkward laugh. I paid. Old habits. Walking to our cars, she asked when I might come home. I said I wasn't sure. She said she understood, but the house felt empty without me. I almost caved right there. Almost. But I held firm. We both needed more time. She texted me the next day. The kid had shown up at the house. Not inside, just standing on the sidewalk looking confused. She'd watched from the window but didn't go out. He'd left after a few minutes. She wanted me to know in case he came back. I felt a flash of anger, then concern. This kid was probably confused too. One day he had this coach giving him special attention. The next, she was gone. No explanation. I wondered if anyone had talked to him about appropriate boundaries. Probably not. I told her she'd done the right thing by not engaging. I said if he came back, she should call me immediately. She agreed. I also suggested she might want to tell her therapist about it. She said she would. Another week passed. My brother said I could stay as long as I needed, but I was starting to feel like I was imposing. Plus, living out of a duffel bag was getting old. I needed to make a decision about my marriage. I scheduled a session with my therapist specifically to talk through options. He helped me list pros and cons, reasons to stay versus reasons to leave, what I needed to feel safe in the relationship again, what boundaries would be non-negotiable going forward. By the end of the session, I knew I wanted to try, not because what she'd done was okay, but because I believed she wanted to change. The resignation, the therapy, the transparency, all good signs, but I needed concrete agreements before moving back home. I texted her that I was ready to talk about coming home, but we needed to set ground rules first. She immediately agreed. We met at the house the next evening, neutral ground, but private. I'd made a list. She listened without interrupting. First, she had to continue therapy for at least 6 months. Second, complete transparency with all devices and social media. Third, no coaching or mentoring roles with minors. Fourth, we'd start couples counseling immediately. Fifth, if I ever suspected anything similar happening again, I'd leave no questions asked. She agreed to everything, said she'd already been thinking about similar boundaries. She showed me a list her therapist had helped her create. It included things I hadn't even thought of, like avoiding places where the team practiced or played. We talked for hours about the rules, about rebuilding trust, about what had really been missing in her life that she'd tried to fill inappropriately. She said she'd been feeling invisible. At work, she was just another accountant. At home, we'd fallen into routines. Coaching made her feel special until she'd confused that with needing to feel special to one specific kid. I shared my own realizations, how I'd been coasting in our marriage, taking her for granted, assuming everything was fine because she hadn't complained, missing signs that she was struggling. Not that it excused her choices, but I owned my part in our disconnect. We cried, both of us. 8 years of marriage almost destroyed by loneliness and poor boundaries, but maybe not destroyed, maybe just damaged and repairable with work. We were both willing to do the work. I moved back home that night, separate bedrooms for now. We agreed to take physical intimacy slow, but under the same roof, starting the process of rebuilding. It felt strange, but also hopeful, like learning to dance again after forgetting the steps. The next few weeks were hard. Couples counseling dredged up issues we'd buried for years, not just recent events, but long-standing patterns of avoidance and miscommunication. Some sessions left us raw and angry. Others brought breakthrough moments of understanding. She showed me her therapy homework, journaling exercises about appropriate boundaries, worksheets on recognizing grooming behaviors. She was taking it seriously, doing the hard work of understanding how she'd gotten so close to crossing an unforgivable line. I did my own work too, learning to voice concerns instead of swallowing them, setting boundaries without feeling guilty, recognizing my tendency to avoid conflict even when it meant ignoring red flags. We were both growing, separately and together. One night, she told me the kid had messaged her from a different account, just asking why she'd left and if he'd done something wrong. She showed me immediately without me asking. Together, we crafted a brief response saying she'd stepped down for personal reasons and wished him the best. Then she blocked that account too. I was proud of how she handled it. The transparency, the appropriate response, the immediate blocking. 6 weeks earlier, she might have hidden it or engaged in conversation. Progress. Real, measurable progress. We started having date nights again. Nothing fancy, just intentional time together. Dinners where phones stayed in the car. Long walks where we talked about everything except our problems. Movie nights where we remembered how to laugh together. 3 months after that awful night in the park, we graduated from separate bedrooms. It wasn't like flipping a switch back to normal. More like slowly turning up a dimmer. Cautious, but genuine intimacy. Learning each other again. She kept up with therapy even when it got hard, especially when it got hard. She'd come home some weeks emotionally wrung out from processing childhood stuff that connected to recent choices. I learned to give her space those nights while still being available. Our couples therapist said we were doing the work better than most. Not perfectly. We still had setbacks and arguments, but we were committed to honesty even when it hurt, to growth even when it was uncomfortable, to our marriage even when it would have been easier to walk away. 6 months later, she got a promotion at work, a management position she'd been passed over for before. She said therapy had helped her find her voice professionally too. She was proud of herself. I was proud of her. We celebrated with dinner at a fancy restaurant, toasting with champagne to new beginnings. The soccer league sent her a thank you card signed by parents and players. No personal messages, just signatures and a generic thanks for her service. She cried a little, grieving the loss of something she'd loved, even though leaving was necessary. I held her while she processed those feelings. We'd survived something that could have destroyed us. Not unscathed, there were scars. Trust rebuilt, but more fragile than before. Innocence lost about how easily boundaries could blur. But we'd survived and even grown stronger in some ways. Looking back, I'm grateful I listened to my instincts that something was wrong. Grateful she'd been willing to get help before crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Grateful we'd both been willing to do the hard work of rebuilding rather than taking the easier path of divorce. Marriage isn't a fairy tale. It's daily choices to show up, be honest, and grow together. We'd almost lost sight of that. Now we protect it fiercely. Regular check-ins, continued therapy, boundaries that keep us both safe. It's work, but it's worth it. That 17-year-old kid, I hope he's okay. I hope someone talked to him about appropriate relationships. I hope he didn't internalize any damage from the situation. Mostly, I hope he grows up understanding healthy boundaries so he never finds himself on either side of a similar situation. As for us, we're good. Not perfect, but good. Still learning and growing. Still choosing each other daily. The crisis that almost ended us became the catalyst for a stronger marriage. Sometimes that's how life works. The worst moments teach us how to create better ones. I still have that timeline document password protected on my laptop. Not because I don't trust her, I do, but as a reminder of how quickly things can go wrong when we stop paying attention, when we take each other for granted, when we try to fill legitimate needs in illegitimate ways. These days, she volunteers at an animal shelter instead of coaching. Safer boundaries with dogs than teenagers. She comes home covered in fur and happy. I volunteer with her sometimes. It's become our thing, giving back together in ways that strengthen us rather than threaten us. We're coming up on our 10-year anniversary. We've already started planning a trip to celebrate, not just surviving, but thriving, not just staying together, but choosing to grow together. It hasn't been the journey we expected, but maybe it's the one we needed. The other day, she thanked me for confronting her that night in the park, for not letting her minimize or deflect, for insisting on real change. She said I might have saved her from destroying her life, from hurting a kid, from losing herself completely. I thanked her too, for getting help, for doing the work, for choosing us, even when it meant giving up something she loved, for being brave enough to face her issues instead of running away. We saved each other, really. That's what marriage is supposed to be. So that's my story. Not a fairy tale ending, but a real one. Messy and complicated and ultimately hopeful. Two people who almost lost everything, but fought to rebuild something better, something more honest, something worth protecting. To anyone reading this who sees red flags in their relationship, trust your instincts. Have the hard conversations. Insist on transparency. Get help when you need it. Don't wait until lines are crossed that can't be uncrossed. Your marriage might depend on it. Someone's safety might depend on it. And if you're the one developing inappropriate feelings, please get help. However special that attention makes you feel, it's not worth the damage you'll cause. To them, to yourself, to everyone who loves you. There are healthy ways to fill those voids. Find them. Marriage is hard. Life is complicated. People make mistakes. But with commitment, honesty, and professional help, even the biggest threats can become opportunities for growth. We're living proof of that. Still standing. Still choosing each other. Still grateful for second chances. That's all. Thanks for reading. Hold your loved ones close. Pay attention. Communicate. Set boundaries. Protect what matters. And never be afraid to ask for help when you need it. Sometimes that's the bravest thing you can do. I grabbed my phone and opened a new browser tab. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard before typing her Instagram handle. The account was still public. I scrolled through recent posts, team photos, motivational quotes, practice schedules. Nothing suspicious on the surface, but I knew the real communication happened in DMS. My brother's apartment door opened. He walked in carrying grocery bags and stopped when he saw me hunched over my laptop. He set the bags down and came over to the couch. I showed him what I was doing. He shook his head and gently closed the laptop, saying I was torturing myself and needed to focus on what came next, not what had already happened. He was right. I helped him put away groceries and we made sandwiches. Normal activities that kept my hands busy while my mind raced. He asked if I'd heard back from my wife since the coffee shop meeting. I told him about the resignation letter. He nodded approvingly, but warned me to stay vigilant. People don't change overnight. That afternoon, I drove past the soccer field where she coached. Practice was in session. The assistant coach was running drills. I parked across the street and watched for a few minutes. The kids looked confused, probably wondering where their regular coach was. I spotted him, the 17-year-old, tall, athletic build, focused on the ball. Just a kid playing soccer. My phone rang. My wife's mother. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately. This time I answered. She was crying, asking what was going on. My wife had called her hysterical, saying I was destroying her life over nothing. I kept my responses vague, saying we were working through some issues. She pressed for details, but I held firm. This wasn't her business. I drove back to my brother's place and found my wife's car parked outside. She was sitting on the front steps, mascara streaked down her face. When she saw me, she stood up and rushed over. She grabbed my arms and begged me to come home. Said she'd already scheduled an emergency therapy session for tomorrow. Said she'd do anything to fix this. My brother appeared in the doorway. He crossed his arms and watched. Having him there gave me strength. I told my wife we'd already discussed the terms. She needed to follow through with everything we'd agreed on. No shortcuts, no negotiations. She nodded frantically and promised she would. She pulled out her phone and showed me an email confirmation from a therapist specializing in boundary issues. The appointment was for 9 a.m. tomorrow. She'd also bookmarked several marriage counselors and wanted my input on which one to choose. I told her to pick whoever had the soonest availability. After she left, my brother and I went inside. He said she seemed genuinely scared of losing me. I agreed, but reminded him that fear wasn't the same as change. Real change took time and consistent effort. He offered to come with me to the house tomorrow when I picked up more stuff. I accepted gratefully. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about the kid. Was anyone looking out for him in all this? His coach had suddenly disappeared with no explanation. If something inappropriate had been developing, he might be confused or hurt. I made a mental note to mention this in my own therapy session. The next morning, my wife texted that she was at her therapy appointment. She sent a photo of the waiting room as proof. An hour later, she texted that it had been intense but productive. The therapist wanted to see her twice a week initially. She'd already booked the next several sessions. My brother drove me to the house around noon. My wife's car wasn't there. She texted that she was at work trying to catch up after taking the morning off. The house felt different, emptier, like something fundamental had shifted in the foundation. I packed more clothes and grabbed some work files. My brother waited in the living room, giving me space but staying close. In the bedroom, I noticed she'd moved all our photos to one side of the dresser. The bed was perfectly made. Her jewelry box was open, our wedding rings sitting on top. I picked up the rings and studied them. Simple gold bands we'd chosen together at a small jewelry shop downtown. We'd been so young, so certain our love could weather anything. I set them back down and continued packing. Downstairs, I found she'd left sticky notes everywhere. On the coffee maker, I'm sorry. On the bathroom mirror, I love you. On my favorite mug, please come home. My brother saw them too. He didn't comment, just helped me carry my bags to the car. Back at his place, I threw myself into work. Client emails, spreadsheets, conference calls, anything to avoid thinking about my marriage imploding. But every notification made me jump, wondering if it was her. By evening, she'd sent a dozen texts updating me on her day, her therapy homework, her commitment to change. I finally responded with a simple acknowledgement that I'd received her messages. She immediately called, but I didn't answer. We needed boundaries while we figured this out. She texted that she understood and would respect my need for space. The next few days fell into a pattern. She'd text updates about therapy, I'd acknowledge receipt. She'd send photos of the house, showing me she was maintaining everything. She'd forward marriage counselor options, I'd review them when ready. Small steps towards something, though I wasn't sure what. Friday afternoon, she texted urgently. The kid had shown up at the house again. This time he'd knocked on the door. She hadn't answered, but watched from an upstairs window. He'd left a note on the doorstep. She was scared to read it and wanted to know what to do. I called her immediately, told her to photograph the note without touching it, then put on gloves and place it in a plastic bag. She needed to document everything in case this escalated. She did as instructed and sent me the photo. The note was brief. Coach, why did you leave? Did I do something wrong? Please talk to me. My heart broke a little. This kid was clearly confused and hurting, but my wife engaging with him would only make things worse. I told her to bring the note to her therapy session and discuss how to handle it appropriately. She agreed and thanked me for guiding her through it. That weekend, I met with my own therapist. I'd found someone who specialized in betrayal trauma and boundary violations. He helped me process the anger I'd been suppressing, the fear that she'd crossed lines she wasn't admitting, the guilt that I'd missed warning signs, the confusion about whether our marriage could survive. He asked me to write down what I needed to feel safe in the relationship again. Not just the practical boundaries we discussed, but the emotional safety, trust, transparency, accountability, respect. I filled 3 pages with requirements that seemed simultaneously too much and not enough. Sunday evening, my wife texted that she'd had a breakthrough in therapy. She'd recognized patterns from her childhood, always needing to be special to someone, confusing attention with love. She was starting to understand how those patterns had led her to seek inappropriate validation from a teenager. I felt a mix of hope and skepticism. Understanding the why didn't erase the what, but it was a start. I told her I was glad she was doing the work. She asked again when I might come home. I said I wasn't ready yet. She said she'd wait as long as it took. Monday brought a new complication. The kid's mother called our house. My wife forwarded me the voicemail. The mother was concerned because her son seemed depressed since his coach left. He wasn't eating much. His grades were slipping. Did my wife know why the coach had resigned so suddenly? We discussed how to handle it. My wife wanted to ignore it, but I thought that would raise more suspicions. Together, we crafted a response. She called the mother back and explained that the coach had resigned for personal family reasons and wished all the players the best. Brief, professional, true enough. But the mother pressed for more details. Said her son had mentioned private training sessions. Said he'd been checking his phone constantly, seeming anxious. My wife stuck to the script, but her voice shook. After hanging up, she called me in tears. The reality of how close she'd come to destroying this kid's life was hitting her. I told her to bring this to therapy too. The guilt was part of the process. She needed to feel it, process it, learn from it, but she couldn't let it paralyze her. She had to focus on moving forward appropriately. She thanked me for not abandoning her completely. Tuesday's therapy update included a homework assignment. She had to write a letter to the kid, not to send, but to process her feelings and take accountability. She shared it with me. It was raw, honest, full of apologies for confusing him and crossing boundaries, for making him feel special in ways that weren't appropriate. Reading it made me nauseous. Seeing her acknowledge the grooming behaviors in writing made it real in a way her verbal admissions hadn't. But it also showed she was beginning to understand the severity of what she'd done. Progress, painful as it was. She also had to write a letter to me. This one was harder to read. She detailed how she'd justified each boundary crossing, how she'd told herself it was harmless, how she'd been more concerned with how he made her feel than what was appropriate, how she'd betrayed not just me, but her role as a trusted adult. I wrote my own letters that week, to her, though I didn't send it, to the kid, though he'd never see it, to myself, trying to understand how we'd gotten here. The writing helped clarify my thoughts and feelings. My therapist said it was good processing. By the second week, we'd settled into a routine. She attended therapy twice weekly and completed all homework assignments. She shared everything with me, session notes, revelations, struggles. I attended my own weekly sessions and shared what I was comfortable sharing. We were doing the work separately, but in parallel. She found a marriage counselor who could see us starting the following week. Dr. Martinez specialized in rebuilding after betrayal. The first available appointment was Thursday evening. I agreed to attend, but made no promises beyond that. We needed professional guidance to navigate this mess. Wednesday afternoon, the kid showed up at the house again. This time, he didn't knock, just sat on the front steps for an hour. My wife watched from inside, documenting with photos but not engaging. Eventually, a car pulled up. His mother. They appeared to argue before he got in, and they drove away. My wife was shaken. She called her therapist for an emergency phone session. Then she called me. She was scared the situation was escalating. What if the mother figured out what had been happening? What if they went to the league? What if everyone found out? I reminded her that nothing physical had happened. Inappropriate feelings and texts weren't criminal, though they were certainly unethical. The best thing she could do was maintain no contact and continue therapy. If questioned by the league, she should stick to the resignation story. Personal family reasons. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining worst-case scenarios. The kid telling his parents about special attention from his coach, an investigation, our names in the local paper, my wife's career destroyed, our reputations ruined, all because she'd lost sight of appropriate boundaries. Thursday's marriage counseling session was brutal. Dr. Martinez didn't pull punches. She made my wife detail exactly what had happened, calling out each boundary violation, made her acknowledge the power dynamic, made her see how her actions could have traumatized this kid. My wife cried through most of it. Then Dr. Martinez turned to me, asked why I'd missed the signs, why I hadn't questioned the late practices sooner, why I'd been so passive in my marriage that my wife sought validation elsewhere. I wanted to defend myself but knew she had points. I'd been complacent too. We left emotionally drained but committed to continuing. Dr. Martinez assigned us homework, separately and together. We had to create a timeline of our relationship, marking when things had started deteriorating. We had to list what we each needed to feel fulfilled. We had to practice difficult conversations. Friday morning brought another crisis. The league director called my wife at work, said he'd received concerning feedback about her resignation. Some parents were asking questions. The sudden departure of a beloved coach was causing disruption. He wanted to meet with her to discuss the situation. My wife panicked, called me hyperventilating. I talked her down and helped her strategize. She needed to stay calm and stick to the story. Personal family matters requiring immediate attention. Regret at leaving mid-season, but it couldn't be helped. Professional and vague. She met with the director that afternoon. He pressed for details, but she held firm. Said she understood the disruption, had apologized, but couldn't share personal information. He seemed frustrated, but ultimately accepted it. Warned her that resigning mid-season might impact future volunteer opportunities. She said she understood. That weekend, I went to the house to do maintenance. The lawn was getting shaggy, and neighbors would start noticing. My wife offered to leave while I was there, but I said she could stay. We needed to practice being in the same space without falling into old patterns or new conflicts. We worked in parallel. Me outside with the mower, her inside cleaning. Occasionally, we'd pass each other and exchange awkward pleasantries. It felt like being roommates with a stranger. 8 years of marriage reduced to polite distance, but it was progress from the acute crisis phase. Sunday afternoon, she asked if we could talk, really talk, not just logistics. I agreed cautiously. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the space between us feeling vast. She told me about her childhood, things she'd never shared before. An absent father, a mother who only showed affection when she achieved something special. I listened without judgment, started to understand how a 33-year-old woman could seek validation from a teenager's attention. It didn't excuse anything, but provided context. When she finished, I shared my own insights from therapy, how I'd been conflict avoidant to a fault, how I'd prioritized peace over addressing issues. We talked for 3 hours, not about us exactly, but about ourselves, who we'd been before meeting, who we'd become together, who we wanted to be moving forward. It was the most honest conversation we'd had in years, maybe ever. That night, I stayed for dinner. We cooked together, pasta with marinara, simple and familiar, ate at the dining table instead of in front of the TV, discussed safe topics like work and family, avoided the elephant in the room but acknowledged its presence with careful glances. I still went back to my brother's place to sleep. We weren't ready for more, but something had shifted. The acute crisis was becoming chronic management, the sharp pain dulling to a persistent ache. Progress, even if it didn't feel like healing yet. Week 3 brought more therapy breakthroughs. My wife's therapist introduced the concept of emotional affairs, how they start innocently and escalate gradually, how they're often more damaging than physical affairs because of the intimacy involved. My wife hadn't wanted to see it that way, but the framework fit. She shared her therapy notes with me, detailed analyses of each interaction with the kid, when professional interest became personal, when appropriate encouragement became special attention, when boundary after boundary fell away until she was texting a teenager about non-soccer things and deleting the evidence. In our second marriage counseling session, Dr. Martinez made us role-play difficult conversations. I had to express my hurt without attacking. She had to acknowledge harm without minimizing. We were terrible at it initially. Old patterns kept emerging. For defensiveness, my passive aggression, but we kept trying. The kid hadn't shown up at the house in over a week. My wife took this as a good sign. I worried he was planning something else. Sure enough, Thursday evening, he messaged her from yet another account, this time angry, accused her of abandoning him, said she'd made him feel special, then thrown him away. The message scared both of us. The tone had shifted from confused to hostile. My wife wanted to respond, to explain, to apologize. I firmly said no. Any engagement would make things worse. She needed to block and document. If he escalated further, we might need to involve authorities. She brought the message to her therapist, who agreed with my assessment. No contact meant no contact, regardless of guilt or concern. The therapist helped her process the fear that she'd genuinely hurt this kid, the reality that even non-physical, inappropriate relationships could cause lasting damage. Friday afternoon, I moved back home, not because we were healed, but because living apart wasn't sustainable. We established clear boundaries, separate bedrooms, scheduled times for shared spaces, continued individual therapy, weekly marriage counseling, daily check-ins about feelings and concerns. The first night was awkward. We moved around each other carefully, overly polite, said goodnight from our respective doorways like strangers. I lay in the guest bed listening to her move around the master bedroom. Normal sounds that felt foreign now. We were roommates working toward being spouses again. Saturday morning, we had our first real setback. I woke up to find find her crying in the kitchen. She'd had a dream about coaching, about the team, about him. She missed it desperately, felt like she'd lost a core part of her identity. The grief was real, even if the resignation was necessary. I didn't comfort her, couldn't yet, but I sat across from her and listened. Validated that losing something you love hurts, even when keeping it would hurt more. Suggested she talk to her therapist about healthy ways to channel that coaching energy, maybe mentoring college students or teaching accounting skills. We spent the day doing separate activities in shared space. She read in the living room while I worked on my laptop. We made lunch at different times, crossed paths politely. It was lonely, but necessary. We were learning to be individuals again before we could be a couple. That evening, she showed me her latest therapy homework, a detailed action plan for rebuilding trust, daily transparency reports, weekly relationship check-ins, monthly assessments of progress, clear consequences for any boundary violations. It was thorough and showed she was taking this seriously. I shared my own homework, a list of non-negotiables for staying in the marriage, individual therapy for at least a year, marriage counseling for at least 6 months, complete transparency with all devices and accounts, no coaching or mentoring minors ever again, zero tolerance for any inappropriate relationships. We discussed how to merge our plans, created a shared document outlining mutual expectations and agreements. It felt clinical and unromantic but necessary. We were rebuilding from the foundation up. Every brick needed to be placed carefully or the whole structure would collapse again. Sunday brought an unexpected challenge. We ran into some of the soccer parents at the grocery store. They asked about my wife's sudden resignation, expressed concern for her well-being, said the kids missed her terribly. We kept our responses vague, but their questions rattled us both. Back home, we debriefed. My wife was shaken by how much the kids missed her, felt guilty for abandoning them, even though staying would have been worse. I reminded her that protecting that one kid from an inappropriate relationship was worth disappointing the others. Hard choices sometimes hurt innocent people. Week 4 of separation. While cohabitating tested our resolve. The initial crisis adrenaline had worn off. Now we faced the daily grind of rebuilding. Therapy was exhausting. Counseling was draining. Living together while apart was lonely. We both wondered if it would be easier to just divorce, but we kept showing up to therapy, to counseling, to difficult conversations, to the slow work of rebuilding trust. Some days were better than others. Some moments felt almost normal before reality crashed back. Progress wasn't linear, but it was happening. The kid made one final attempt at contact, a handwritten letter mailed to our house. My wife brought it to me unopened. Together we decided not to read it. She took it to her therapist, who helped her process the guilt of not responding while maintaining appropriate boundaries. The letter went into our documentation file, unread but saved. By the end of the month, we'd established a new normal, still in separate bedrooms but sharing meals, still doing individual therapy but making progress in couples counseling, still hurt and wary but committed to trying. The acute crisis had passed. Now came the harder work of true healing. My brother asked if I regretted not just leaving. I thought about it seriously. The easy path would have been divorce, clean break, fresh start. But the easy path wasn't always the right path. My wife had made terrible choices but stopped before causing irreparable harm. She was doing the work, so was I. The road ahead was long. Trust, once broken, took years to fully rebuild. We might never get back to where we were, but maybe we could build something better, something more honest, something with stronger boundaries and deeper connection. Only time would tell if we'd make it. For now, we took it one day at a time. One therapy session, one difficult conversation, one small step toward healing. The coach and the kid were in our past. Our future remained unwritten. We held the pen together, carefully crafting what came next. The next morning brought a new challenge. My wife's sister called, furious. She'd heard through the family grapevine that we were having problems and demanded to know what I'd done. My wife must have told her mother something during one of their weekly calls. I kept it simple, said we were working through some issues, and asked her to respect our privacy. She hung up on me. My wife texted apologizing for her sister, said she'd only told her mom we were in counseling, nothing specific, but her mom had jumped to conclusions and spread the word. Now we'd have family drama on top of everything else. I told her to handle her family however she needed to, but to keep the details private. That Thursday's counseling session focused on communication patterns. Dr. Martinez had us practice active listening exercises. My wife would speak for 2 minutes about her feelings, then I'd reflect back what I heard, then we'd switch. It felt forced at first, but by the end, we were actually hearing each other differently. Friday afternoon, my wife got another call from the league director. This time he was more direct, said he'd heard rumors about why she'd really resigned. Some parents were speculating about inappropriate behavior. He needed to know if there was anything he should be concerned about. My wife stuck to the script, but came home shaking. We discussed whether to get ahead of the rumors. My wife wanted to send a general email to the parents, thanking them for understanding about her resignation. I thought that would just fuel more speculation. We compromised on her sending individual thank you cards to a few parent friends, keeping things light and positive. The weekend brought a breakthrough. During Saturday's therapy session, my wife finally connected the dots between her need for validation and a specific incident from her teenage years. Her high school teacher had given her special attention during a difficult time at home. Nothing inappropriate happened, but she'd internalized that pattern of seeking approval from authority figures. Understanding the root helped her see how she'd almost repeated it from the other side. She came home energized by the revelation. We talked about it over dinner, the first real conversation we'd had in weeks that wasn't about logistics or boundaries. She explained how the pattern had played out in other relationships too, always needing to be someone's favorite, someone's special project. The coaching situation was just the most dangerous manifestation. Sunday morning, we attempted our first joint activity since I'd moved back, just grocery shopping, but it felt significant. We moved through the store together, discussing meal plans and comparing prices. Normal couple stuff. An elderly woman commented on what a nice young couple we made. We both smiled politely, not correcting her assumption that we were young or that things were nice. That afternoon, my wife showed me her latest therapy assignment. She'd mapped out all her relationships, identifying where she sought inappropriate validation. Her boss, who she'd tried too hard to impress. Her younger cousin, who she'd made into a project. Even our neighbor, whose approval she'd craved when we first moved in. None crossed lines like the coaching situation, but the pattern was clear. Monday brought more family interference. My mother-in-law showed up unannounced, claiming she was just in the neighborhood. She cornered my wife in the kitchen while I was in the shower, demanding to know what was really going on. My wife held firm, saying we were working through some communication issues and everything was under control. Her mother left dissatisfied but defeated. We debriefed that evening. My wife was proud of maintaining boundaries with her mother, something she'd never been good at before. We role-played how to handle future family intrusions, set up a united front approach. It felt like we were becoming a team again, even if we weren't fully reconciled yet. Tuesday's individual therapy session was hard for me. My therapist pushed me to examine why I'd been so passive in my marriage, why I'd ignored red flags. We traced it back to my parents' volatile relationship. I'd learned to keep the peace at all costs, even when the cost was ignoring serious problems. It was painful, but necessary insight. I came home to find my wife cooking dinner, real cooking, not just reheating leftovers. She'd made my favorite pasta dish, the one she used to make when we were first dating. We ate together at the dining table, candles lit. Not romantic exactly, but intentional. We were trying. Wednesday afternoon, the kid's mother called again. This time she was angry. Her son had told her about the private coaching sessions, the Instagram messages. She wanted answers. My wife handed me the phone, unable to speak. I took over, calmly explaining that the coach had resigned due to family obligations and wishing her son the best. She threatened to go to the league. I said that was her choice and ended the call. We spent the evening preparing for potential fallout, documented everything we had, reviewed the timeline, made sure our stories were consistent without being rehearsed. My wife was terrified, but I reminded her that she'd done the right thing by resigning before anything physical happened. The truth, while uncomfortable, wasn't criminal. Thursday's couples session was productive. Dr. Martinez praised our progress in communication. communication and boundary setting. Said we were ahead of schedule in some ways, but she warned that the real test would come when life got stressful again, when work got busy or family got demanding. Could we maintain these new patterns under pressure? Friday came and went with no word from the league. The kid's mother must have decided not to pursue it. My wife was relieved, but also oddly disappointed. Part of her wanted the confrontation, the forced accountability. Her therapist said this was normal. Sometimes we need external consequences to fully accept our actions. Saturday marked 2 months since the confrontation in the park. We acknowledged it quietly over breakfast. 2 months of therapy, counseling, hard conversations, and slow progress. We weren't where we wanted to be yet, but we were far from where we'd started. My wife reached across the table and touched my hand briefly. I didn't pull away. That afternoon, we tackled a house project together. The garage had needed organizing for years. We sorted through boxes, deciding what to keep, donate, or trash. Found our wedding memorabilia. My wife held our cake topper, a simple ceramic couple. One figure had a small chip from our move 3 years ago. Imperfect, but still standing. We kept it. Sunday brought an unexpected visit from the assistant coach who'd taken over the team. He stopped by to return some equipment my wife had left behind. Stayed for coffee. Told us the team was doing well, but missed their original coach. My wife handled it gracefully, asking about specific players without mentioning the one who mattered. He left none the wiser. The next week, my wife started a new volunteer opportunity, teaching basic accounting skills at a community center, working with adults who were changing careers or starting businesses. She came home from the first session glowing, said it felt good to help people in an appropriate way, to use her skills without the complicated dynamics of coaching kids. Our counseling sessions shifted focus, less crisis management, more relationship building. Dr. Martinez had us create new rituals, daily check-ins, weekly date nights, monthly relationship reviews, structure to support the changes we were making. It felt corporate but necessary. We were essentially starting over. My wife's individual therapy deepened. She worked through childhood trauma I'd never known about. Came home some weeks exhausted from processing, but also lighter somehow, like she was shedding weight she'd carried for years. I gave her space on those nights, but stayed present, available without hovering. 3 months after the park, we had our first real argument. Not about the coaching situation, but about household chores, normal couple stuff. But we fought differently, stayed focused on the issue, used the communication tools we'd learned, resolved it without anyone storming out or shutting down progress. The kid graduated from high school. My wife found out through social media. One of the other parents had posted team photos. She showed me, pointing out how he'd grown since she'd coached him. There was sadness in her voice, but not longing. Just the normal grief of time passing and kids growing up. I sat with her while she processed it. Summer arrived with its own challenges. Pool parties and barbecues where we had to appear normal. Friends asking subtle questions about why we seemed different. We developed a rhythm of deflection and redirection. Yes, we'd been through a rough patch. Yes, we were doing better. No, we didn't want to talk about details. My wife's therapy homework evolved. Less about understanding the past, more about building a healthy future. She created vision boards for her life. Goals that didn't depend on external validation. Career aspirations. Personal growth targets. Relationship hopes that centered on mutual respect rather than need. Our physical relationship slowly resumed. Not all at once, but in stages. First, just sitting closer on the couch, then holding hands during walks. Eventually, hugging goodnight. Each step negotiated and consensual. We were learning to be intimate again without using physical connection to avoid emotional issues. 4 months out, we faced a test. My wife's former assistant coach called. The league was looking for coaches for the fall season. Would she consider coming back? She thanked him, but declined firmly. Said she was committed to other volunteer work now. Hung up and immediately told me about the call. Transparency in action. We celebrated our progress with a weekend trip. Nothing fancy, just a cabin a few hours away. Neutral territory where we could be ourselves without the weight of our house's recent history. We hiked, cooked together, played board games, remembered why we'd fallen in love in the first place. Came home feeling more connected. The kid's mother ran into us at the farmer's market. Awkward greetings. She mentioned her son was doing well, heading to college on a partial soccer scholarship. My wife congratulated her genuinely. No subtext, no hidden meaning. Just a former coach glad her player was succeeding. The mother seemed satisfied and moved on. 5 months brought integration. The new patterns we'd worked so hard to establish started feeling natural. Check-ins became less formal. Transparency became habit rather than effort. We still had individual therapy, but dropped the bi-weekly couples sessions. Dr. Martinez said we were ready. We weren't so sure, but trusted her judgment. My wife's accounting career flourished. The confidence she'd gained in therapy translated to work. She pitched new ideas, took on leadership roles, got another promotion. This time, the validation came from within, rather than needing others to see her as special. She was proud of herself. I was proud of her too. 6 months after everything fell apart, we moved back into the same bedroom. Not because we had to, but because we wanted to. The guest room became an office. We bought new bedding together. Small symbol of a fresh start. That first night, we just held each other. No pressure for more, just the comfort of sharing space again. The holidays approached with their own challenges. Family gatherings where everyone watched us carefully. My wife's mother still fishing for information. My brother quietly supportive. We navigated it together, presenting a united front, not pretending everything was perfect, but showing we were solid, committed, working. New Year's Eve found us at home. Quiet dinner, champagne at midnight. Resolutions that focused on continued growth rather than dramatic change. We'd done the hard work of crisis. Now came the harder work of daily maintenance, choosing each other every morning, protecting what we'd rebuilt. January brought a final test. A letter arrived from the kid. He was 6 months into college. Wanted to thank his former coach for believing in him, for the extra training that helped him get the scholarship. No mention of the abrupt departure or the confusion after. Just gratitude from a young man finding his way. My wife brought me the letter immediately. We read it together. She cried. Relief, regret, closure, all mixed together. We decided she could write back. Brief, professional, congratulating him on the scholarship and wishing him well in college. Nothing more. She showed me the response before sending it. 3 sentences. Appropriate, final. February marked a year since everything started. Since those first comments about pretty eyes. We acknowledged it quietly. How far we'd come, how much we'd learned, how differently we handled challenges now. The work wasn't done, might never be completely done, but we were committed to doing it together. These days, life feels normal but deeper. We communicate better, set boundaries clearer, support each other's growth. The crisis that nearly destroyed us became the catalyst for a stronger relationship. Not perfect. Perfection isn't the goal. Just honest, connected, intentional about protecting what matters. My wife still volunteers at the community center, loves teaching adults who chose to be there, comes home energized by appropriate helping relationships, sometimes mentions missing coaching but without the weight it used to carry, just acknowledging a loss while appreciating why it was necessary. We're planning that anniversary trip finally. 10 years of marriage, including the hardest one imaginable, but we made it through, still making it through, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one conversation at a time, building something stronger than what we had before. The other day, my wife said something that stuck with me. Said she was grateful I'd pushed her to face the truth, that my insistence on accountability might have saved her from destroying multiple lives. Said she loved me more now than before, because now she knew I'd fight for us, even when it meant fighting against her worst impulses. I told her I was grateful too, that she'd done the hard work of change, that she'd chosen growth over defensiveness, that she'd proved people can recognize dangerous patterns and stop them. We'd both grown, both changed, both chosen to rebuild rather than run. So that's where we are. Not a fairy tale ending, but a real one. Two people who faced the worst and chose to build something better. Who learned that love isn't just a feeling, but a daily choice. Who discovered that the strongest relationships aren't the ones that never face problems, but the ones that face them together. To anyone in a similar situation, there's hope, but only if everyone does the work. Real work, hard work, honest work. No shortcuts, no minimizing, no excuses, just commitment to growth and change. It's possible. We're living proof, still standing, still choosing each other, still grateful for the second chance we almost didn't take.
Real Reddit stories. If you love wild things and crazy drama, hit that subscribe button and drop a like to help more people find the madness.